Hello everyone, John here from Gaming in the Wild, and I've got a new video for you today. It is another long-form review. It is a deep dive into the forthcoming Citizen Sleeper 2 Starward Vector. So please settle in if you want to hear about the game, a game that I think is perhaps the first must-play indie game of 2025. I was lucky enough to get early access, I finished it, and this is my review. I hope you enjoy it. If you do, then you can always subscribe to the channel for more like this. Please drop a comment, anything you like, your favourite food, your favourite game, the name of your pet. It all helps people find the videos, and I think it will make for a pretty funny no context comment section as well. That's it for the intro. Enjoy the review, and I'll tell you about the channel's Patreon at the end. So Citizen Sleeper 2 Starward Vector is the third game from Jump Over the Age, aka solo developer Gareth Damian Martin. It is published by Fellow Traveller. It has a soundtrack by Amos Roddy. It's another wonderful ambient soundtrack that I'll be listening to a lot outside of the game for sure. In fact, you can get an upgrade of the game on Steam if you're buying it, where you get the soundtrack folded in. So if you're a fan of owning MP3s, then you can do that. The game is coming out on PC and Mac, Switch and Xbox, including a day one Game Pass release. And I played this game on Steam. I initially started playing it on my Ally handheld, but there's quite a lot of small text here and my eyes aren't amazing, so I moved over to my desktop Mac and played it on a monitor with a mouse. I played the first Citizen Sleeper using a controller on Xbox, and I do think that the controller works perfectly fine for it. But if you are someone that plays on a desktop with a mouse, it suits it very, very well actually. There is a lot of dragging and dropping dice from your dice rolls into various actions, and I've just found that it worked really well with the mouse. It was very intuitive, and now that I've done it, I think it is maybe the best way to play, but it does work perfectly well on a controller. As this is a game about existing in the cold depths of space in a robot body in various space stations, I decided to roleplay this one just a little. There are certain games to me that feel like they should be played at night with low lights, with headphones clamped on, staring into the light of your monitor. This is one of those games, so I played this game only at night. It felt wrong to play it in the daytime. So in the depths of the Icelandic winter, with the cold and the dark, that definitely added a layer of atmosphere to the game for me. In case you're someone that didn't play Citizen Sleeper 1 and you're wondering if you should, the game has been designed that you can play it first if you want to, but I would say that I got a lot more out of it having played the first game first. There are some returning characters and continuing story threads that will make sense to you if you play Citizen Sleeper 2 first, but will land different, that will just hit different if you've played the first game. The first game is still on Game Pass, so I would really recommend picking up that first game and playing through it before Citizen Sleeper 2 if you haven't already, although the game is designed to be played without any previous knowledge. There was also a series of newsletters that went out during the development of Citizen Sleeper 2 called the Helion Dispatches. These are pirate radio broadcasts that are just scripted out and that were sent out as text emails. I read these between the games, and they did actually give me a welcome primer on the world of Citizen Sleeper. They reminded me about a couple of things, about which companies are doing which kind of things, about what kind of underhand activities are going on in the Citizen Sleeper universe. So check out the Helion Dispatches if you would like to fill yourself in a little bit before diving into the game. You can find them easily at citizensleeper.com. They are sitting right there on the homepage. And as I was saying, the embargo has just dropped on the game. It's sitting at a Metacritic 87. That's 5 points up from Citizen Sleeper 1. It got some very good reviews. Tech Radar gave it a 10 out of 10. They said Citizen Sleeper 2 Starward Vector tells a radical science fiction tale through an impeccably designed system and a moving narrative rife with themes that are acutely attuned to our times. Eurogamer also gave it a 10 out of 10 and said, with a newfound sense of tension and showpiece contract missions, Citizen Sleeper is transformed. This follow-up has improved the RPG formula in every way. It got 8s from Edge and The Guardian. Edge said it's a wonderful, expansive piece of sequel craft. The Guardian said, despite its bleakness, the world of Citizen Sleeper 2 is full of compassion, and it's a joy to return to the universe Gareth Damian Martin has created. So really good reviews across the board there. I think the lowest review was 75, which is still a decent score. And the developers described this one by saying Citizen Sleeper 2 takes players to the starward belt a richly realised ramshackle set of habitats in an asteroid belt full of secrets, stories, and characters who are just trying to make ends meet. Choose a class, configure your skills, and assemble a crew in unique tabletop-inspired gameplay. Your future depends on the roll of a dice. And I have to say about this one, my own summary of this game is that it is perhaps the most welcome indie sequel I've ever played. Citizen Sleeper 2 is a true gift to fans of the original. No longer confined to Erlin's Eye, we travel the belt as a new sleeper protagonist with a stolen ship and a ragtag crew. Each place is lovingly rendered and wonderfully realised, from the ice mines to the colonies to the long-abandoned wrecks. The compelling cast and interwoven themes of precarity, selfhood and solidarity make this an unforgettable, must-play game. And I'm sure that's music to a lot of your ears if you're fans of the original game like I was. I loved the original Citizen Sleeper. First of all, I loved it for the writing. I think it conveyed a lot about place. We were in the vast, bustling space station of Erlin's Eye. And it also conveyed a lot about how it feels to be a sleeper. A sleeper is a robotic body that has had a consciousness transferred into it, while the human who the consciousness is copied from sleeps. And the reason they do this is to work off debt while they sleep, so they don't have to personally do it. Their robot body will do it before being presumably terminated at the end of the contract. This does put sleepers in a pretty existential position. They don't have all of those memories. They are aware that they are copied from a person and are, in some sense, not the authentic being, but rather a copy of it. So it's a really interesting existential position that sleepers find themselves in. Of course, they have thoughts. They are like replicants from Blade Runner, and they do want to flee. They do flee. That's where these games begin. In Citizen Sleeper 1, we are a refugee that arrives on Erlin's Eye. To try and stop sleepers from fleeing, the corporation that makes them, S&ARP, makes them need a certain stabilizer. It's like insulin, and without it, their bodies will die. So sleepers that flee are in a terrible position. They have to find black market stabilizer to stay alive. All of this at the same time as being fairly roundly discriminated against, and dealing with the alienation from their own robot body and the dissociation from the self that they were transplanted from. And on top of all this, the first game had a wonderful atmosphere. It was really helped along by Amos Roddy's soundscape, the importance of which I don't think can be overstated. That includes the roar of aircon, the rumbling of engines in the station, the sounds of big spaces, the bustle of markets and restaurants with the clanking of plates and background voices, and his gorgeous, melancholic electronic ambient soundtrack. I think the sounds and the scores of that game really grounded me in this universe, because visually we are really just looking at architectural diagrams of the space that we are in. So it's not like a first-person game where you're literally walking around experiencing the space. You're more imagining yourself into the space. And the sound was really, really key to grounding me in those spaces. And the music was really, really key to keying into the emotional core of the game. The first game was also interesting from a gameplay perspective. It is a tabletop-inspired game using dice roll mechanics and skill checks, so luck is a big factor. You really are rolling the dice to find out whether you will have the medication you need to survive, whether you will have enough to eat, or whether you can get out of a scrape. The world building was also amazing, with various competing corporations, cataclysms, consequences. It's a universe with a deep history and a deep game world that is laced with really intelligent considerations. There's deep themes of community, solidarity, loneliness, psychology, ecology, and taken together, it forms a really, really welcomely fresh take on cyberpunk, which has become more and more dogmatic over the years. So it's a very modern, fresh look at the cyberpunk genre that kind of transcends it in a way that makes it bigger, that improves the genre, which is a huge thing to say about a very crowded genre. Citizen Sleeper 1 hit my Games of the Year list at number 3 that year. It could have been number 1. And so I was, of course, very, very excited that we were getting a sequel. It felt improbable. It felt like after In Other Waters and Citizen Sleeper, Gareth might move on to other things. So I was absolutely delighted to hear that they were taking another bite of the cherry and giving us Citizen Sleeper 2. And when it was revealed that we'd be able to actually travel around space in the sequel, that blew my mind too. Because having been rooted in Erlin's Eye with the fantasy of escape out into the solar system and the starward belt, you really wanted to do that in this game. It's such a rich universe. There was definitely a sense of wanting to see what was out there. I was getting Wanderlust to explore more of this universe. which of course isn't available, but Gareth has made it available. That's what this sequel is. We can fly from station to station, and we can experience the wider world of Citizen Sleeper, travel to new places, and witness their circumstances, their travails, meet the characters, try the foods, experience the spaces and all that they have to offer. And I'm really happy to say that for me, this game really does live up to that promise. It layers on some new mechanics. We have an expanded horizon to explore. We have new locations, we have new characters and some returning characters. And it has an episodic format that feels really, really rewarding, really, really well put together. So Citizen Sleeper 2 is such a welcome game, and I'm really glad that it exists. And that feeling set in pretty much straight away. If you've played the original game, you might remember the alert ping that comes when you get a new drive, or when you wake up in the morning. It sounds like it's rattling out of an old speaker. You'll hear it tens or scores of time during your playthrough of Citizen Sleeper. And the comforting familiarity of that sound, it made me smile, and it snapped me straight back into Citizen Sleeper. The sequel retains that sound, it retains a lot of the UI, so it feels very comfortable. It's like slipping into comfortable old shoes. But it becomes very apparent that you are in serious trouble at the start of this game in the very first scene. You wake up as a new sleeper who is halfway through rebooting themselves in a desperate attempt to break their reliance on stabilizer. That is the medication you need to keep your body working, a major drive of the first game. In Citizen Sleeper 2, you found a way to break that. You've been working under a gangster called Lane, who is very exploitative, who rations stabilizer to the sleeper. You've come up with this scheme that if you reboot your frame, you can break that need for the serum. However, the process is interrupted by Lane the gangster. You manage to escape, you steal a ship, you make a desperate getaway. You are low on fuel, you're low on rations, your memories have been all but wiped from the incomplete reboot, and Lane is hot on your tail. It's a gripping beginning that thrusts you straight into the action. And I have to say that the moment where your ship detaches from the station in the first minutes of the game and blasts off into space made me gasp out loud. That is the moment that never happened in Citizen Sleeper 1. We spent that game in the eye. We never got to leave it behind, although our sleeper dreamed of doing so. And now we finally do. So in the very first moments of the game, we've slipped the leash of our captor, we've broken our reliance on stabilizer, and we head out into the starward belt to find whatever awaits us next. This was in the demo for the game, so I don't feel like I'm spoiling it. This is just the first half hour of the game, really. But the first place that you land is a station called Hexport. This is a ragtag settlement built on the remains of some old abandoned space reflectors. And you find out pretty quickly that Lane is going to be on your tail. You have a ticking down clock. If you played the first game, you will remember that at a point there is a bounty hunter who is seeking you out. And you have to sort yourself out and get into a good position before that clock runs down. It adds a bit of pressure to the game. So being hunted by Lane feels kind of familiar. And in the time that you have to fix up your ship, which means sourcing parts, taking on jobs to find money, including contracts, one of the most interesting new mechanics in Citizen Sleeper 2. And all of this works as a tutorial. You're going to have to find some fuel, you're going to have to find some jobs, you're going to have to find the contract board and find a crew. And with that, the game has begun. And this game has a new cast. We have Seraphin, who is seemingly the sleeper's boyfriend, but you've lost your memory, and so Seraphin is helping you escape. They too are escaping from Lane, but they're also dealing with the fact that you've lost your memory of their relationship, and this is really sensitively written and a really interesting facet of the early game, I think. You will renegotiate and, piece back together your relationship throughout the game. You'll also meet Junie, a young hacker who has some covert motives of her own. You'll meet Bliss, a recurring character from the first game, who was on Erlin's Eye, who can fix up your ship for a price. You'll meet Femi and Nia, a brother-sister spacer crew who are in a pickle of their own. And you'll meet various others that I won't spoil here. And all of them are great. They have such nice illustrations. They have such nice writing. You really do feel like you're at the start of a big adventure in a way that I really, really enjoyed. And in a mirror of the first game, in which you have to find community in a very busy station, you have to form a different kind of community in Citizen Sleeper 2. These people that you meet may form into a ship's crew over time, all of whom are running from something or searching for something. They're all lost. They're all just trying to get by and do their thing. And this ship that you have stolen becomes not only your method of escape from Lane, but perhaps the start of something new, the start of a new community, where these people can find a place to be, where they can trust in it and come on your journey towards the unknown. And as well as a new scenario, the game also layers on some new gameplay. The switch from Erlin's Eye to travelling the Starward Belt also leads to some really interesting new gameplay elements. Instead of sourcing stabilizer, there are other resources that you have to pull together. There is, of course, cryo, the game's money, which can be earned in various ways, from bar shifts to farm shifts to contracts and that kind of thing. Your ship needs fuel, and you can see whether or not you can get to places on the Starward Belt map. When you hover over them on the map, it will tell you if you have enough fuel to get there, and you don't necessarily know if there's going to be enough fuel to refuel when you get there, so you have to stockpile fuel and plan your moves quite carefully, which adds a layer of strategy. There are also rations, which are food. There is a kitchen on the rig. You can go inside the rig and look at various rooms, some of which will open up over time. You can cook meals for yourself that will replenish your character's energy. And then there is also scrap and various other components, some of which are mission specific, some of which are general scrap that you can be used for repairs and for upgrades and that kind of thing. But you're introduced to the idea of contracts fairly early. So there's a contract board in the first Hexport town that you reach. Sometimes people will give you contracts if you just meet them and talk to them. These are things like tech recovery from old space hulks, missing person cases, things like that. So you need to find the fuel and the rations to cover the trip. You can then select a couple of crew members to come with you. Each crew member has their own skills, whether that's intuit, engage, that kind of stuff. So you can kind of complement the skills that your sleeper has by filling in the blanks with your crew members. And when you take crew members with you on a contract, they will appear on the screen alongside you, and you won't only get your own dice to fulfill tasks, but you'll get access to extra dice from your crew members. So having a crew isn't just about the vibes, it's actually got gameplay implications as well. And when you arrive at a contract, you'll be taken to a new small area of the game, like a little mini map. You will have time pressure a lot of the time, like you'll have 10 cycles in order to fulfill the mission. You can go out, spend your dice, try and get through locked doors, find data cores, rewire things to try and get into preserved areas of the ship and steal something. And all of the time pressure is on you because those clocks are ticking down. Sometimes there will be emergencies that take place, and so you have to try and decide whether to race to your goal or whether to try and, seal an airlock that is leaking before it blows up at the cost of all of your dice and a lot of time and rations and that kind of thing. So this game has definitely got more strategic elements in it. It's definitely got more pressure on the player in it than the fairly relaxed playthrough of Citizen Sleeper 1. And all of this is codified as well into the stress mechanic. If your sleeper becomes stressed, they suffer. You can get damaged dice that you can't roll. You can get glitched dice that don't act the same or have worse odds. And so accruing stress is really bad news, and it will happen in contracts and intense situations. The only way that you can get rid of it is by resting, which is really interesting. So while it feels pretty punishing, with food ticking down on a time-sensitive mission, with your dice crumbling, with your crew members getting burned out and stuff, unlucky dice rolls can mean you fail the task, you run out of time, and you can get into a tailspin where everything's going wrong. The crew gets burned out, you have a bunch of broken, dead, glitching dice, and you have an inevitable failure on your hands. The first time this happened, I didn't love it. I thought that was kind of annoying. It felt like a no-win scenario. But as you move through the game and you remember the tabletop roots of it, it starts to work for me thematically. It's a game in which you can't just go around winning all of the time, which is something that we get used to in video games, that there is, if we replay it, maybe we can get a different scenario, get the scenario we want. This game doesn't allow that. You can't revert to earlier saves. You only have one save file. And the game narratively allows for your failure. So if you end up being like a pretty crunched, broken sleeper with only a couple of working dice, that's just the situation you found yourself in, and your two options are to restart the game, which is a bit of a radical move, or to just soldier on through and roleplay it. And one of the main critiques of Citizen Sleeper 1 is that despite trying to simulate pressure and tension on the player, you could beat the system quite quickly. Once you figure out how to earn money, you can just bankroll a lot of it. And once you figure out how to get a reliable supply of stabilizer, you can just bank it and bank it and bank it. And that allowed the feeling of precarity, which is central to the game's story and vibe and theming, to dissipate a little too quickly. And that doesn't happen in this game. This game exerts pressure in various fronts, and it keeps the pressure on, and that does help to heighten that feeling of precarity. I'm quite curious to see how players and reviewers respond to this stuff, because nobody likes to lose, and you will definitely lose sometimes playing Citizen Sleeper 2. And I will say that once again, the writing in this game is excellent. It's characteristically excellent for a Gareth Damian Martin game. It combines a lot of Gareth Damian Martin's interesting interests. It's laced with personal politics. It touches on capitalism, corporations and syndicates, labor unions, and the value of solidarity, the value of individuals trapped in systems. It also contains a diverse range of subjects from cyberpunk and sci-fi to real-world stuff like cultivating seaweed and mushrooms, farming, bike couriers and their place in society, pirate radio and the value of alternate media. And it's all curated and woven together into what I consider to be a really rich and generous offering that is very much of its maker. And all of the characters in this game have great writing too. They have distinct personalities, they have drives of their own, whether they are self-interested and shady, whether they are friendly and shady, headstrong and loyal, or tirelessly working towards some kind of greater good, whether they are community leaders or manipulators. It's a really interesting array of personalities that you meet in this game. I will also say that all of the places you encounter are intensely memorable, from the Hexport's precarious position built on an old Solheim solar reflector, to the scatter yards, a cluster of shipyards where you'll go to try and get your ship upgraded, to the Greenbelt, an asteroid converted into a farm to feed the inhabitants of the belts. And there are many more places too. I'm not going to spoil them. Each place is exciting and fresh and distinct. And this is because the descriptions themselves are great. From just the architectural illustrations that we're looking at and the really nice character portraits. And if you combine that with these airy soundscapes and the text descriptions, I felt thoroughly immersed in this world and in these places. Playing this game was like going into a late night trance. It lets your imagination fill in the blanks and gives you enough food for that to happen. And it got to a point where I felt like I have memories of being in these places. You know, I remember the scatter yards, I remember the green belt, I remember treading those walkways, visiting those refectories and marketplaces, machine shops and so forth. And I think it's a huge achievement in atmospheric world building and describing these places so vividly that let it draw what this solar system really is and what it feels like to be there. And at the same time as all of this, there is the cyberpunk part of it. There is the nagging reminder of your status as a consciousness in a mechanical body, which adds a layer of aloneness, even among your crew and even among your growing community. One quote stayed with me particularly on this subject when during one expedition in a rotting space station, someone says to the sleeper, "You too are a machine that has become a story." And just finally, I wanted to touch on the idea that this game nudges the player towards doing the right thing, in my opinion. Some games have a white hat path and a black hat path, you know, like in Red Dead, where you can be a good Arthur or a bad Arthur. There are moral choices that are laid out before you, choice-based games that allow you to roleplay as a good guy or a bad guy. And a lot of Citizen Sleeper's choices are in difficult grey areas, but it is a game that ultimately seems optimistic, I think, about the potential of life in these shaky circumstances on the edge of crumbling capitalism. The conditions are hard and cruel and sometimes unbearable, but people struggle by together, and you are one of them. And you have to make decisions in this game, and the game nudges you towards the light. And I really like that in a time when things seem so dark, when things can seem so dark out there. I love that this game has the strength to have hope, to see light, and to nudge the player towards that. And I think really what could be more valuable in our times than that. So just to run through some high points and low points, the good stuff, it's mostly good. The writing is excellent, it's sensitive, it's memorable. The characters and story are compelling and propulsive. The pacing is right, the soundscape is immersive. All of the different spaces have their own atmospheres in a way that is really essential for a game like this. I really liked the music. It communicates the loneliness of space life. It really is like an emotional core for the game, I think. I really like the ramping up of tension throughout the stress mechanic, the clocks winding down. The space travel was cool, having to find fuel, find rations, do jobs, and then head out into space again. Really, really enjoyable. Each of the places has its own atmosphere. I really enjoyed the wide world of the belt, which was immersive and memorable as well. The game's politics hit right, and I really liked what was done with recurring characters and continuing plot lines. It was very ingeniously woven together. The story really did land as well. It's not easy to end a game, you know, and this game really does it well. I think it's a very worthy sequel to Citizen Sleeper. I also really liked the idea of practicing self-care on your character, which is kind of rare in video games. I think that's a lesson that many of us need to hear. And I really just think this is a gift of a sequel all round. As for the bad stuff, all I really have to say is that the UI in Gareth Damian Martin's games, it's always clean, it's always functional, it's always nicely designed and appealing. But there is a level where I hit where I don't quite find the automatisms of using it for, 10 plus hours, where you start doing things without thinking about it. I often find myself thinking, why can't I click on the map right now, and realizing that I'm in a location that I have to leave first, or I find myself pausing in the map because I haven't internalized where the button to back out of the map is. So it's a very UI heavy game. The whole thing is UI really. And it has a few edges on it that didn't quite sink into my brain to the level where I was just doing everything without thinking. So it felt like just a little bit of an obstacle between me and the game. But maybe I'm just used to that frictionless iPhone experience at this point. And let's face it, Gareth Damian Martin is one person, and Apple is, one of the most valuable countries in the world. So I will let them off for that. So I really enjoyed my journey with this game, and I really liked where the story ended up. There were enough forking paths and emergent situations and differing outcomes that it felt like being told a compelling story, but a story in which I was very much an active participant. It felt like my version of this story. I was charting my own path through space. I was making decisions that mattered, and that's something that makes it stick with me after the credits rolled for sure. It's another great game. I would say it's the first must-play indie game of 2025. That is Citizen Sleeper 2, Starward Vector. So there it is, that's Citizen Sleeper 2 Starward Vector. I hope you enjoyed the review. Felt like I was rambling a little bit there, but I tried to get through my bullet points as well as I could. I actually spoke to Gareth Damian Martin about the game today. We had a 1-hour conversation about it. It was really insightful. I'm going to publish it sooner rather than later, so subscribe to the channel to see that pop up, and you can always switch on the notifications if you're eager to see it first. Hope you enjoyed this review. If you did and you would like to support this channel, there is a Patreon. If you sign up for the Patreon for $1 a month, you get an invite to our wonderful Discord server and loads of behind-the-scenes stuff. I will also say that Gaming in the Wild is about to be 5 years old, and I've been canvassing the community about what they would like to do to celebrate, and an activity that the community has settled on is having a week-by-week playthrough of Kentucky Route Zero. We're going to play each episode together. There is going to be a special channel in the Patreon Discord for us all to talk about it, and then I'm going to make a podcast at the end of each week. Kentucky Route Zero was actually the first game that I ever reviewed when Gaming in the Wild was just a podcast before it was a YouTube channel. But it was a very short podcast. It was just an 11-minute mumble, just some unformed thoughts really about the game. And because that game has become so foundational to Gaming in the Wild as a podcast and a channel, I think it's time to do it justice. So on that 5-year anniversary, we're going to have that community playthrough. There is going to be a 5-part Kentucky Route Zero series. If you're a patron, then come find the Gaming in the Wild channel in the Discord. There are some details there. And if you're not a patron, you are welcome to join. You can support this podcast and channel and take part in that playthrough. You can talk to the community, give me your questions and thoughts, and they will become part of that series. Patreon.com/gaminginthewild if you'd like to join in. Other than that, you'll be getting that new episode sooner rather than later with the Gareth Damian Martin interview. So if you've gotten all the way to the end of this video and you're not subscribed, then hit the subscribe button to hear about it when it comes out. And until then, take care of yourselves and each other, and bye-bye for now.